There is a specific kind of quiet in a house at 5 in the morning. It is the kind of quiet where you cannot hide from yourself. You sit at the kitchen counter, staring at the dark surface of your coffee, waiting for the caffeine to do a job it is no longer capable of doing. You are waiting for it to kickstart an engine that feels like it has been running on dirty fuel for a decade. I know that feeling because I lived inside it for a long time. For most of my 40s and well into my 50s, coffee was my only strategy. I was a sales executive, spending half my life in airports and rental cars, running on adrenaline and whatever black coffee I could find in hotel lobbies. I thought that was just what a man did to provide. You ignore the fatigue, you push through the brain fog, and you assume that the heaviness in your body is just the natural price of getting older. But the fatigue was just a dashboard warning light. The real failure was happening deep inside the infrastructure. A lot of men are not broken. They are just ignoring the wrong things. We tend to look at our bodies like we look at a dented bumper. We see the outside getting a little rough, but we assume the engine block is fine as long as the car still turns on. But that is not how it works. What starts in the body usually ends in the head. I remember the exact phase when I could no longer pretend everything was fine. It was not just that I was tired. It was that the predictability of my own body was gone. The morning response that used to be a reliable sign of life simply stopped happening. When the body stops responding the way you expect it to, it does something to your pride. It quietly dismantling your confidence from the inside out. I did what most men do. I blamed the stress. I blamed the quarterly targets. I blamed the travel schedule. I created every excuse I could think of to avoid having a real conversation about what was actually failing. That silence, that unspoken shame, it builds a wall. My marriage at the time was already under strain, but that physical distance, my refusal to address the reality of my own declining vitality, it became a heavy weight in the room. We eventually divorced. I do not blame her for that. I know exactly what I was avoiding. I had to hit a point of absolute frustration to finally pay attention. When I started putting the pieces back together, I realized I had to stop looking for quick fixes. I am not the kind of guy who buys into magic pills or overnight promises. I needed to understand the mechanics of what had gone wrong. What I discovered was that my problem was not a lack of effort. It was a lack of flow. If you are over 50, circulation matters more than pride. Everything we care about as men, our energy, our cognitive sharpness, our ability to perform in the bedroom, relies entirely on the plumbing. It relies on the ability of blood to travel unimpeded through thousands of miles of microscopic vessels. And for years, I had been destroying those vessels. I was drinking massive amounts of cheap coffee on an empty stomach, flooding my system with stress hormones first thing in the morning. I was constricting my blood vessels right when I needed them to open up. I was running a high-performance engine without any lubrication. The change happened when I started paying attention to the fuel. I began reading about how the body actually produces hormones and maintains vascular health. I learned that testosterone and healthy blood flow do not just magically happen. They require raw materials. They require specific types of fats to build the hormones and to keep the infrastructure flexible. That is when I changed the way I start my day. I stopped drinking black hotel coffee on an empty stomach, and I started adding a specific high-grade oil to my morning routine. I am talking about a clean, cold-pressed MCT oil, medium-chain triglycerides. At first, it sounded like the kind of thing people talk about in expensive juice bars, not something a guy from Texas does. But I looked at it purely as mechanical maintenance. You do not run a dry engine, you give it the right viscosity. The process is very simple. I wake up here in Scottsdale, usually before the sun is up. Before I touch any caffeine, I drink a large glass of water to rehydrate the system. Then I brew a good cup of coffee and I blend in a tablespoon of this oil. You have to blend it, not just stir it, so it emulsifies. The first thing I noticed had nothing to do with my physical vitality. It was the clarity in my head. Instead of that sharp spike of anxiety and the inevitable mid-morning crash, I felt a steady, quiet focus. The fat in the oil slows down the absorption of the caffeine. It stops the massive release of stress hormones that constrict your blood vessels. Instead of panicking the system, you are feeding it. But the real shift happened a few weeks later. I started noticing that the heaviness in my legs during my daily walks was fading. The recovery time after my light resistance work was shorter. And then the morning response started coming back. Not every day at first, but enough to remind me that the system was not dead. It was just severely neglected. This is what happens when you clear the pipes and provide the right raw materials. The healthy fats in the oil give your body the exact building blocks it needs to produce testosterone naturally. At the same time, by lowering the stress response from the raw caffeine, your blood vessels are finally allowed to dilate. The pressure normalizes, the flow returns. Confidence comes back when the body starts responding again. When I married Alyssa, I was a different man than I was in my 50s. I was no longer hiding behind excuses or pretending that fatigue was a badge of honor. Alyssa is a direct woman. She expects honesty, and she expects me to show up. I can only do that because I stopped ignoring the maintenance of my own body. Most men wait too long to face what has changed. We think that admitting our energy is dropping or our performance is slipping makes us less of a man. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Taking ownership of the mechanics of your own body is the most masculine thing you can do. I am not telling you that putting a spoonful of oil in your coffee is going to reverse time. I am not promising that you will wake up tomorrow feeling like you are 30 years old again. It is a process. You did not wear down your infrastructure overnight, and you are not going to rebuild it by next Tuesday. But it is a foundational step. It is about changing the way you signal your body right at the start of the day. You're either telling your nervous system to panic and constrict, or you are giving it the fuel it needs to open up, produce hormones, and push blood exactly where it needs to go. I still have mornings where I feel my age. I am 63. I am not invincible, but I am consistent. I get up, I drink my water, I blend the oil into my coffee, and I take my walk. I maintain the infrastructure. You are not the only man dealing with this quiet decline, but you do have to be the man who decides to do something about it. Start with the fuel. Look at the flow. It is not more complicated than that. Simple as that.